Okay. Should a couple cohabitate before they consider getting married, or, just forming some sort of serious relationship? Okay. Should they cohabitate? My opinion is that they should. A lot of people will say no, it's wrong. But once again, I tend to discredit those people, because if you're going to use the whole traditional and what's right and wrong, apply that across the board. I know I don't like when people want to be modern in their views or progressive, but then on certain views, related views, then they don't want to be that way anymore. Right? The same people that are talking about, oh, people shouldn't, live together or do this and that. Well, what do you feel about premarital sex? You're for that, but you're not for living together. Right? And to me, I never understood that. It's like you would rather engage in premarital sex but not live together. But you look down upon somebody who's living with their potential spouse, but they're not sleeping together. Right? So to me, it's just like, it sounds foolish either way, but my thing is, if you're going to go hard all the way. Don't stop. And it's like this whole idea, I want to hold on to one last belief that's morally correct, because somehow that's supposed to save me. Right? And of course, living with somebody, I understand that you can never simulate what it means to be in a marriage or some sort of, serious type of relationship. Right? But you still try. There's nothing that you can do to simulate Game 7 of the NBA Finals. Right? But that doesn't mean you practice. That means that it doesn't mean that you don't practice 5-on-5, right? It doesn't mean that you don't play scrimmage games to see where you're at, right? Yeah, of course you can't simulate the big spotlight, but when you do practice scrimmage, you can possibly see potential problems. That's the whole point of a scrimmage. I mean, if you ever played a sport, you get told by your coaches not to go too hard because you don't want to get anybody hurt, and you want to save it for the real game. But even then, you want to see what you guys can do versus what you can't do. What people don't understand, that there's nothing that you're going to do that you haven't already done in practice. Really, there's nothing that you're going to do that you haven't already seen yourself do. Right? So the reason why I hold on to this whole idea of cohabitating is because it doesn't make any sense for me to really get in a serious relationship with somebody, or even a marriage, and for the first time in our lives, we're living together for an extended amount of time. Right? Yeah, of course, you have your spot, she has hers, and you may stay for a day or 2, 3 days, but you always have your spot. But the whole idea of, this is the permanent situation, this is where we are, no one's going anywhere, you have to practice that. See, what people don't understand is you have problems that you can work through, okay? But then you have problems that you really can't work through, and people don't want to accept that. This whole myth about marriage is that once you get married, you're going to work through all the problems you have. So people have this, how can I put this, rush to get married because psychologically they want to convince themselves that they're going to stick through any amount of problems. I've seen it with my boy who recently got married. There were some issues that he didn't want to deal with, and I know he avoided. But he felt like once you have this shield of marriage on, that those problems, we're going to work through it. But he has expressed to me indirectly that had he known that they would have some of the problems that they've had, he would have stuck around for some because they're workable. But then there are some that he doesn't really feel like they can come over. And that kind of hurt me as a friend to see another friend in that situation. But to be real, when we could have told him this, he wouldn't have listened to us anyways. When I tried to tell him that they should live together, he didn't want to listen anyways. And they were together for 4 years. So it wasn't like it was some chick that he met. They knew each other. But my whole stance is when you live with somebody, you can't avoid certain problems. See, what people don't understand is subconsciously, or even consciously, you will avoid certain problems. People, for the most part, don't like conflict. So if you can avoid a conversation, you're going to avoid it. You know, it is what it is. And let things die down and cool over. But when you're living with somebody, you can't avoid it. It's in your face. You know, I remember, before I went to college, when I was at home, if I did something wrong, my mom was always there. So it's just like, man, I can't avoid it. We live under the same roof. But when I had moved out and, I did something wrong, or, I forgot to call, or I forgot to, just do something, I don't know, I could avoid it. So my mom could be mad, she'll leave me a voicemail, and I'll call her back in a couple of days, and she would forget it would happen. So in a sense, I knew how to avoid certain issues. But when we were under the same roof, you couldn't avoid it. You couldn't go anywhere. You couldn't leave. And what I'm saying is, when you live with somebody, issues and problems are going to come up, and you just can't leave. So you can't say, well, I'm going to hang up the phone, or I'm going to let you cool out, so I'm going to go back to my spot for a couple of days. There is no break. It's not like boxing where the round is over. It's one big ass fight. And that's going to happen. And when you live with somebody, to me, this is where you can kind of see the problems that you're going to have. And then you can determine the problems that you guys can work through and the problems that you may not be able to work through. When people talk about conflict resolution, it can only work if A, you identify a problem, and B, the person that you have a problem with admits that it's a problem. So if you have a problem with me, that's fine. But part 2 of that is me seeing that I have a problem and, me trying to make that change. But if you feel like what I'm doing is wrong, but I don't feel that way, that's a real issue. Right? You're not doing this right. Okay, I think I do, so I'm not going to change. And it's those types of dynamics in a relationship that you have to see. People are afraid to really know the truth about somebody, but it is what it is. Now, most people, I'll be real, have problems. But for the most part, I would say, yeah, you can work through them if people are willing to buy into the whole team concept. But people have issues that, you can't work through. There are certain issues that I'll be willing to go through the fire to solve. But then there are issues that I'm like, I'm not going to deal with this. Maybe it's smoking, or it's something. There's certain issues that I'm not going to work through. So if you have this problem, you change it, or I move on. There is no debate. There is no let's meet halfway. I'll cut back here, you cut back there, so we can make this work. It doesn't work that way. And like I said before, when you're not living with somebody, you don't get, to me, a good enough opportunity to figure out what those problems are. I'm not saying that they're going to be there. I'm saying that you have to check for them. And when you're not living with somebody, I don't see how you can go through the potential amount of problems you can have. Like I said, you can't simulate what it means to be in a real marriage. But when you practice and you scrimmage, to me, you can at least get a glimpse of the possible problems you're going to have. Maybe you can fix it. Maybe you can't. Right? Just like in sports, you have a team, they may not be playing well. What do? Let's, change our lineup. Let's change the rotation. Let's run some different plays. But if that doesn't work, what do? You trade that person. Somebody gets fired. Some sort of relationship gets ended, whether it's a coach being fired, a GM getting fired, or a player being traded. The relationship ends. It is what it is. So you really can't be afraid to do it. To me, we don't. It's necessary. We don't live in a world where people have to get married or people have to cohabitate. It's a different time. So there is more emphasis to seeing if it can work. I understand that people once did things a certain way, but once again, people don't want to look at the social atmosphere at the time. Oftentimes when people compare the past with the present, what they don't do is compare the social climate, the dynamics of male-female relationships, the dynamic of, just being professional or just having a job. So because when I came up with this, I factored in all that. And to me, there's no way around it. You have to cohabitate with somebody. It doesn't make any sense to make some sort of official agreement to be with somebody, whether it's through marriage or, I don't know, having children, but you've never lived with this person before. And you've never even potentially went over what could be problems. And you're lying to yourself when you think that the power of marriage will help you overcome any and all problems. I know that's preached, but it's just a setup for failure. So anyways, I'm curious to see or hear what you guys have to say on this. You guys take it easy. God bless.